That said, let's go to Michael in the UK. Michael, what time is it over there right now?
Hi there, Eric. Yeah, we're looking at about 7:30 here.
Okay, so not
in the
so
evening,
bad.
PM. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, you're talking to Gail and Eric. What would you like to talk about?
Thanks very much. I do watch the show, and I said to the screener that one of the things I've noticed is that it's very easy to counter argue religion. It's very easy because. Like I said to the screener, these world religions, of which there are many, hundreds, but if we look at the top 3 or the top 6, in my mind, it's pretty clear that a lot of these are man-made concepts, shall we say. One of the things I've noticed in the show is that when people call in, you're saying about the difference. First of all, sorry, let me start again. Would you identify yourself as an atheist or agnostic?
So I identify myself as an atheist.
I do too.
And actually both, an agnostic atheist.
As well.
And so just like earlier in the episode when we were talking about more nuanced conversation, you can look in the dictionary and those words are synonymous. But when we break them apart, we can have that more detailed conversation. And so agnostic, speaking to knowledge, we don't think we have all the information. So we're agnostic on this specific subject. But whether or not we believe the claim theism, that a God exists, we reject it. And so we are atheist agnostics.
Okay, so I understand that position a lot better now because I wasn't actually sure, exactly where you stood. But
sure.
Yeah, what I have an issue is that people are claiming that they belong to a religion of which I do too. And
what religion do you belong to?
I do take Judaism.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So it's just really I'm trying to get this out in the right way. I mean, I could tell you lots of things about Judaism which I don't agree with. Slavery, one of the things you talk about as well. But just because, let me simplify it, just because these things are most likely man-made concepts, i.e. religion, it doesn't exclude the possibility that there is something, greater than ourselves, whether you want to call that a god or, I don't believe in deities at all, but...
Well, you're right.
In fact, that's specifically excluded from our religion, for instance, but... I'd much prefer a sort of a wider debate about that it's something could potentially exist. And just because there might be a small chance in, people who are atheists that it definitely doesn't exist, I think that in itself...
Well, that hold on. You just created a straw man.
Okay, so can I just, if possible, don't put me in that category just for a moment because I just want to finish...
Okay, well, no. It's just when you say those atheists who say that absolutely nothing, you're going to have to find one of them to talk to about that specifically because you don't have one here.
Okay, so the burden of proof, obviously, if you want to say if there is a God or there isn't a God, the burden of proof is definitely on the person that says there is a God. Because I agree with that completely.
So specifically, the burden of proof is on the claimant.
I believe so, yeah.
Yes.
I really do believe that, yeah. But it shouldn't be a case of trying to have to prove it. It's what somebody internally believes. We can't rule out. I mean, can I ask you a question? Would you be able to rule out that there is, we call it God, but let's just say a higher intelligence, let's say that was the creator of what we know?
Okay. So... I think I'm not trying to get away from your question. I want to build onto it. So the short answer is we can't rule that out if we can't investigate it. But that kind of leads into when is it time to believe something? When should we accept a claim as true? Because if I don't have evidence that I can investigate, then... And I still accept something as true, then how come I don't do that for Bigfoot or aliens or fairies or gnomes or goblins or whatever. I understand that these are things that are being claimed, but until it's substantiated, when is the time, if not when there's evidence, to accept it as true?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I accept that completely as well. But when you take that position, surely then nothing, stands to reason. You're asking for, let's say, something wonderful and beyond meaning to, for something to prove to you that there is. The difficulty I have with that position is that you can't always, reach truth when your mind is so, you're one way only on that. You're asking for a grand claim to prove something to you, and something like that isn't always possible.
But it's a grand claim. That's the point, Michael. You've made a grand claim. I believe it was Hitchens that said extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. If the claim is that a God exists, that's a massive claim. So when I ask you for evidence of God exists, what I think I heard you say, Michael, was that because you believe it in your heart, or you said something like that's doesn't rise to the level of evidence. And so it's not unreasonable for a person to whom you are speaking to ask for evidence. And if your evidence is because I feel it in my heart, I feel in my heart there's garden fairies. That's not fair for me to ask you to accept that claim based on the feeling in my heart. Am I tracking with what you're saying?
No, not really. See, you're asking for evidence, and, whatever it is, or the entity that it might be, it doesn't have to put a call to action.
Sure. So
in your requirement, let's say.
Is there anything?
There's lots of difficult things that happen in the world.
Michael,
they don't have to prove something to you or I, for instance.
So if that was the case, then they would be number one. First off, they would be completely in the exact same category as not existing at all, because there's absolutely nothing substantiating it. But the second thing is. Oh my gosh, I completely lost my train of thought. I completely lost
me as well. Yeah, I mean,
it happened.
Yeah.
Okay, but I just kind of want to take that back to when it's the correct time to accept something as true. You're talking specifically about, you're saying that God does not have it's not incumbent upon that God to prove to you that they exist. That was my question. Is there anything else in your life that you use that reasoning for? Is there anything else?
It's like, okay, so let me pose a question to you.
Sure.
It's like you're asking for evidence-based information to allow your decision process to become easier to make a conclusion on. And in all walks of life, that makes complete sense.
Right.
But there are certain things. It's like, for instance, if I was to ask you if your mother loved you, for instance.
I have evidence of that.
Well, the thing is, that could be subjective.
No.
You don't ask your mother every week. Well, I don't. If she loves you or not.
Well, no, she tells me. And Michael,
and she shows him. And that's evidence.
And we can work together, and you and I could probably agree on those indicators of love and then test whether or not those indicators of love that we agree on are being demonstrated, and then we can see whether or not that's true in a way that we both agree on. How does that apply remotely to your God? And specifically, I want to go back to that question. Where else in the world? So you said mother's love, and I hope that this was a good enough example to kick that one out. Is there anything else? Yeah. Is there any reason that you would use that kind of reasoning for? Because it's not good reasoning.
So I can see, you've really done well on that one, because, I can agree with what you said there about evidence-based claims. Okay, so that maybe wasn't the best one. Well, let's go to something a bit more subjective, like gravity then.
It's a bit more subjective.
We call it gravity. Well, we know there's some force that's pulling us onto the ground, and we've named that gravity, but we don't have any understanding about how that actually works. Would you agree with that?
No, we don't agree with that. There is evidence that gravity exists, and now the arbitrary word gravity applied to that physics piece. I don't think that's what you're arguing. I think that you're saying because it's not tangible and because you don't have a grasp of it, just sometimes there are things that we don't understand that someone more professional than us, the experts, would be. I would struggle with describing gravity to you and explaining what the evidence is, but I absolutely know that the experts in gravity can explain gravity to you. And so just because we can't grasp it doesn't mean that there's not evidence for it.
Right. And then,
Okay,
and then
again,
not only
so,
that, but
you know,
just to dovetail into your point, is we have been able to clock what terminal velocity is.
And that's evidence.
Right? We've been able to. And so while we may not have as strong of a hold on the mechanisms as we're comfortable with, I kind of feel that way about everything, Michael. I'm tentative about everything. You know, I think one of the things that blew my mind in middle school is when I was told that there's an infinite amount of discrete values between 0 and 1, right? You just keep adding zeros after the decimal, and you can never get to 1. You know, you have this idea, you have Achilles and the tortoise, right? And having the distance, that Achilles will never overtake it. And because of that, you know, this is more and more and more information. Just because I can give you a number of usable discrete values between 0 and 1 doesn't mean that we can't explore more. And so while we should explore more, I'm also not going to throw the baby out with the bathwater when there's evidence for gravity, right?
Yeah, I mean, remember, mathematics is a man-made concept. Even
that describes a real thing that we see in nature.
Well, you know, maybe it does, maybe it doesn't.
Well, there's one person we're talking to. There are 2 people on this show. That's usable, and it's a concept that you and I both agree on. And so in that way, there we go.
Yeah, but God, let's just say if, you know, a God didn't create that, or wider power didn't create that. That was
us.
Yeah, that was us. And we use that as a measurement because it's fixed, and we know that we can always add, you know, the 1 next to the 0 and put a decimal point there and then create infinity that way. But that doesn't correlate with anything in the wider scheme of, you know, why we're here and how we got here.
Well, does there have to be a why, Michael? What if we just
repeat that, Eric?
Oh, does there have to be a why? What if we just are?
Yeah, I mean, I accept that as
Isn't
well.
Isn't that existentially terrifying?
Well, you know, yeah, you're right. I mean, in some ways that is. I just don't see how anyone can, honestly, if they want to be completely honest with a question, how, if we don't know the answer and you don't know the answer and I don't know the answer, all you're doing is you're appealing to, you know, to evidence. That's all you've got.
Well, that's what we should appeal to.
There are lots of things that you know, if we see like a scene of a crime, you know, there are detectives that can piece together how it happened, where the angles were, and things like that. You know, you're using logic, but some things are beyond logic and beyond our understanding. So all I'm trying to say is to take a position of, that's why I asked you the question whether you felt you were atheist or agnostic, was if you're agnostic, then you're at least saying, look, I don't know the actual answer. Everything I believe leads me to believe that there isn't. Well, and you've put all of your eggs in that one basket. And I'm not sure that that's the best way to approach it. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, I would say that the vast majority of us...
Anyway, not being argumentative there.
No, I think the vast majority of us are agnostic atheists in that way. So there are people I've met who say, I am a Gnostic atheist. They say there are no gods. And usually when I talk to them, they specifically point to previously defined gods. And so they'll say, okay, well, look at this God, you know, the God of the Christian Bible, Jesus Christ. So I've investigated that, and I found that the claims in that book, some of them are provably not true. And because of that, I can say that this is not 100% truth. And so in that way, they've gone through the different religions and gone, okay, I can write them all off. I'm an atheist. But when we're talking about what somebody down the street I've never met thinks in their head, well, that is also a definition of God to them. And because of that, it would be very presumptive, especially if you called and said that your God is a coffee mug. Well, I believe that those exist, so I can accept your claim. But until then, we should be. And by the way, I know it's a small sample size, but live studio audience, can I get a show of hands of those people who would classify themselves as agnostic atheists? How about any Gnostic atheists? Yeah, 100% of those people who raised their hands identify with agnostic atheists. And that's probably, this selection, people self-selecting themselves into our building for having that same viewpoint, but hopefully that helps.
Yeah, well, it's been great talking to you.
Yeah.
Nice to hear, this point of view, and also to be able to talk about this, rationally. But in closing, all I'd like to say is that I don't think people should necessarily, rule out existence of something, even though in our human brains and mindsets, I think what's happened is people have aligned if something else exists along with world religions and gods, like I said at the top of the conversation, which I really do strongly believe are man-made concepts and interpretations, just like Thor was, and those types of things. But I just also think it's important just to keep an open mind that there might be something beyond what we know, even though you don't have to follow a deity, a god, or a specific religion in order to feel that way.
And in closing, to bookend that, the time to believe it is when there's evidence. And until that time, you should absolutely live your life.
Eric, I mean...
how is it circular? Hold on. How is it circular? I was going to move on to the next call, but now I want to know.
Sorry,
how is it circular?
I don't want to take up all your time, but it is a circular argument because you can always use that and just say, look, unless that thing that we call a god or a creator comes down to me and proves something to me, exponentially that there is, and then I'm a believer. Well,
we'll start with a piece of evidence. Yeah. Start with a piece.
And Michael, the progress we've made as a society, we are dependent on evidence. That's what makes us heal diseases, and that's what makes us build faster airplanes. The more things that we believe that are true, and we know that they're true because they're based on evidence. I think you're trying to talk outside. I believe you. I think I understand this. You want to talk outside the realm of evidence, and you want to have this. You said that we need to stay open-minded. Well, a lot of us are open-minded, and if I do see evidence for it, then yes, I'll embrace that and I'll believe it. But to put it in a place where it doesn't have to have evidence is where we're going to part ways, because that's how we know this chair is going to hold my weight. That's how we can do this show. All of those things were built and grow based on evidence. And this realm that you're talking about, the existence of a deity or a being or a force or whatever it is, sure, I'll give you that. Sure, maybe there is something somewhere somehow, and as soon as we see evidence for it, we will incorporate that into our belief system. And I don't think it's unfair to ask for that.
It's also not circular.
Well, it is where you claim that you need evidence for every,
Give me an example of something that doesn't.
It transcends.
So from this call, this week, the assignment is to give me an example of something that does not require evidence that we should accept. And I would love for you to call back in and give that. I think that would be an interesting and productive conversation to have. Until then,
Eric, I'm going to take you up on that. If I can think of anything, I'll phone back.
Sounds good, brother.
Great.
All right. Take care.
All right. Take care.